Welcome back to ILTV News and happy Passover to all our viewers. We open with the latest on the security situation today as a terror attack took place near Hebron in a car ramming attack that injured one police officer. The suspect fled to the nearby village of Dura. And in Gaza, the IDF has expanded operations and has now surrounded Rafah, cut off the southernmost city and about 20% of the population from the rest of the enclave. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The city of Rafah and 20% of the Gaza population is now surrounded by forces from the 36th Division and the Gaza Division operating in the Philadelphia corridor along the Egypt-Gaza border. The Golani Brigade entered from the border in the southeast. The announcement came as the army grabbed complete control of the Morag corridor, cutting off Rafah from Khan Yunis. The IDF's expanded buffer will stretch from the Egyptian border to the outskirts of Khan Yunis. Elsewhere, the border from Gaza has been expanded from several hundred meters to about 2 kilometers in most areas. Over the past weeks, during the operations in the Morag corridor area, the IDF eliminated dozens of terror operatives and destroyed Hamas infrastructure, including tunnels. 2 soldiers were wounded during the operations and expanded control of the area. Engineering forces are constructing a road along the Morag corridor. New evacuation orders were given to Gazan civilians after 3 rockets were fired toward Israel. The Air Force struck dozens of targets across Gaza over the holiday weekend, targeting cells of operatives, buildings used by terror groups, and other infrastructure. The Air Force struck inside the Al-Ahli hospital that was used by Hamas to plan and execute terror attacks. Prior to the strikes, the IDF provided early warning in the area and used precision weapons to avoid civilian casualties. Defense Minister Katz called on Palestinian civilians to remove Hamas and release all of the hostages before the IDF further expands operations in the Strip. Katz said intensive IDF activity will soon expand to additional places in Gaza and civilians would be forced to evacuate the combat zones. Katz said that Hamas is unable to protect the residents of the territory. Its leaders are hiding in tunnels, and their families are in luxury hotels abroad, with billions in their bank accounts while using the Gazan population as hostages. It's time to stand up and remove Hamas and release all of Israeli hostages. This is the only way to end the war, Katz said. And those interested would be able to voluntarily move to other countries around the world, in accordance with the vision of U.S. President Donald Trump, which Israel is working to carry out.
Well, millions of Israelis were forced to shelter during the Passover holiday yesterday when the Houthi terrorists in Yemen fired at least 1 missile towards central Israel. The missile was intercepted outside Israeli airspace and shrapnel fell in Judea near Hebron. Sirens sounded across central Israel, Jerusalem, and in some communities in Judea and Samaria. There were no injuries reported. The Houthis claim to have fired 2 rockets and a drone targeting Ben Gurion Airport and the Sdot Micha Air Base. Nothing got close to either target. Hours after the attack directed at Israel, the U.S. struck Houthi targets in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. The strike reportedly killed 5 and wounded 13, targeting the Al-Sawari factory in the Matna area. Earlier, the U.S. struck the Al-Hodeida area in Yemen. Now, with nuclear tensions rising, the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran have begun direct talks over the weekend, with both parties praising the talks and President Trump stating he expects the regime to make a decision quickly about the next steps as the maximum pressure sanctions continue to strangle the Iranian economy. Let's take a look at the latest. The United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran wrapped up a high-stakes round of nuclear talks in Oman on Saturday, the first direct engagement between the 2 sides since President Trump returned to office. The talks, which took place under tight secrecy, were described as positive and constructive, but many remain wary given the Islamic Republic's long history of deception on nuclear matters.
طرفین تعهد خودشون رو برای پیشبرد این گفتگوها تا رسیدن به یک توافقی که مطلوب 2 طرف باشه و از موضع برابر صورت بگیره نشون دادن.
In a rare development, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Islamic Republic Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi also briefly met face-to-face following the negotiations. Witkoff stated that the U.S. red line is nuclear weaponization, a point of serious concern given not only the Islamic Republic's continued enrichment activities, but also their international funding of terrorism. Following the talks, President Trump stated that the talks are going okay, adding that a decision on the Islamic Republic would be made very quickly. He also emphasized that while diplomacy is being pursued, it must deliver tangible results, and that all military options are still on the table. Israel, meanwhile, remains deeply skeptical of the process, warning that the regime in Tehran could be using diplomacy as cover while advancing its nuclear ambitions. Israeli officials have repeatedly stressed that only a complete dismantling of the Islamic Republic's nuclear program, similar to the Libya model, would be acceptable, and they have not ruled out a military option. A second round of talks is expected to take place in Rome this coming Saturday. As the pressure on the regime continues to grow internally and externally as a result of the sanctions, all statements thus far remain optimistic that a deal can be reached. But only time will tell if such an agreement will meet Israel's security requirements as well. And now joining us to discuss Israel's position on the threat of a nuclear Iran is Brigadier General Relik Shafir, who took part in the daring Israeli Air Force strike on the Iraqi nuclear reactor in Operation Opera back in 1981. Brigadier General Shafir, thank you for joining us today. Just to start, what's your initial response to these talks that we saw between the United States and Iran over the weekend?
I think it's a positive note. And let's hope that if there is an agreement, it will curtail Iran's capability of advancing towards a nuclear weapon. And if not, then the only option would be a military one.
Now, if it does come to striking these nuclear sites in Iran, can you tell us a little bit about what that strike might look like? Is this something that Israel can do alone? And do you estimate the strikes would be limited to nuclear sites or possibly also key IRGC sites as well?
Nothing is off the table. Of course, Israel can strike alone, as had been shown in April. And the question is, what will be the outcome? Israel can hit the nuclear plan, which is placed in about 33 sites. Some of them are, the most important ones are heavily guarded by a lot of rock and cement. And let me just explain, for the sake of our viewers, the heaviest weapon that the U.S. bombers, the B-2, can carry is a 25,000 pound bunker buster, and the heaviest load that our F-15s can carry are about 3,000 pounds. So the difference is foursome, and so you can understand that Israel can hurt Iran, but it cannot destroy the nuclear program. For this, you need a strategic air command, as the United States have. About hitting the targets, of course, not just in nuclear sites, but other sites might be in the making, either IRGC or others, like their ability to ship oil out of Iran, which are vulnerable targets. But that remains to be seen as we make decisions with the Americans.
Now, I know that many Iranians are actually wondering what's taking Israel so long, and they view such a strike in some cases as a lifeline for them against a very unpopular regime. Does Israel have a long-term strategy on Iran based on what you know and the information that you have?
Israel has a capability and plans, obviously, that have been, the Israeli Air Force has been training for many, many years for that eventuality. But I doubt whether this will take place without the U.S. support and permission, so to speak. And that remains to be seen with President Trump keeping Israel as a proxy for attacking Iran, but giving a chance to the talks at present.
Now, finally, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience and how does the challenge of a nuclear Iran today compare with the threat from Iraq in 1981? Is this operation more complex or dangerous?
No, I wouldn't say that, because today the Air Force can deliver weapons from a distance, from afar. And Israel has, I would say, complete superiority with the U.S. Air Force supporting it all the way to Iran, because Iran has virtually no Air Force, and their high-end anti-air missiles have been hit in 2024 by us. So the question of danger is difficult to judge, but at the time, 1981, we had to hit the targets in close proximity from direct bombing from a couple of thousand feet. And the area was surrounded with missiles. It's a flat area, or it was a flat area. And at least the supposition was that 2 of the 8 airplanes would be shot down. Happily, that was not the case. Happily, certainly for me and my buddy Ilan Ramon, who were last in the line, about 12 seconds behind the leader.
Now, we know that after the nuclear reactor in Iraq was destroyed, there was some pushback in the international media, while at the same time behind closed doors they were saying, thank God that this happened and that Israel did this. What do you expect the response would be if Israel is indeed forced to act against the Islamic regime?
The word forced to act, I think, is misplaced. Wants to act is different. And I think the world will understand the reasons it's been going for such a long time that the Iranians have been clearly cheating on the inspectors. And both the Europeans are more worried than the Americans, because the missiles that Iran is planning or wants to use can reach European capitals as well. So I think the world is actually looking for relief from the threat. But that remains to be seen, because the international scenario is quite difficult, because remember that, for instance, the Chinese, who are supporting Iran, have a quest for attacking Taiwan. And that curtails somewhat the ability of the United States, or the will of the United States, to use direct attack, but they would rather use Israel as a proxy.
All right, well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us today on the broadcast, and of course, wish you a happy Passover to you and your family. Brigadier General Relik Shafir, thank you.
Same to you, thank you.
In challenging times, we look for ways to support and strengthen Israel. Investing in Israel bonds is, of course, one of the most direct and impactful ways to make a difference. Israel bonds is a smart financial decision with strong returns. It's a statement, I stand with Israel. It's an investment in hope, strength, and a brighter future. Since 1951, Israel bonds has been a smart investment, raising $54 billion worldwide, including $4.5 billion since October 7th, to help build and sustain the Jewish state. Building tomorrow together. Scan the QR code on your screen to learn more. As Passover began in Israel on Saturday night, Hamas released a propaganda video of the only American believed to be alive in captivity. The video showed 21-year-old Idan Alexander in distress and an emotional state during the video as he pleaded for his release. ILTV Shosh Bedrosian is in Hostage Square now with the latest. Shosh, what can you tell us about this video?
Emily, this is the second time Hamas released a propaganda video of American citizen Idan Alexander since he's been in Hamas captivity. Now, the timing of this video was extremely painful. It was the exact same time that Passover was beginning here in Israel, and people were starting to gather at their tables for the Seder that evening. Now, the 21-year-old from Tenafly, New Jersey, said in the video he should be home with his friends and family, and he came to Israel as a lone soldier. As the IDF continues their ground defense inside of the Gaza Strip in what they say will lead to the defeat of Hamas, the terror group is still producing propaganda videos below the surface. The same hour as the start of Passover in Israel, Hamas released a propaganda video of American-Israeli Idan Alexander in what appears to be in a tunnel. The 21-year-old was emotional and in clear distress as he spoke to the camera, begging for him to be released in the 3-minute undated video. Alexander stated he was held in Gaza for 551 days, which indicates the video was taken recently. The use of Alexander in the video holds significant weight, as the American government has been working to get him released earlier than anticipated in a deal, despite the fact that he is an Israeli soldier. The 21-year-old is the only American still believed to be alive in the Gaza Strip, although the bodies of several other Americans are being held captive by the terror group. Alexander's family approved the release of the video and said in a statement, quote, "Our son Idan's love for Israel led him to leave his comfortable life in New Jersey and join the IDF. On October 7th, he stood his ground alone at his military post, trying to protect nearby communities from Hamas terrorists." The statement went on to say Alexander remains alone in the tunnels and is calling on President Trump to get him released, saying, quote, "Our hope and trust rests with you now." The statement says, "We implore you to use your leadership and negotiation skills to secure a deal that will bring all 59 hostages back to their families." Egyptian mediators are now pushing a proposal that would release 8 living hostages instead of 11, which was part of Israel's most recent proposal in exchange for restoring the ceasefire, in which Hamas said they would release 5 hostages instead. The new push by Egypt is in response to both sides refusing to compromise further, according to reports. Israeli media reports saying Netanyahu agreed to soften demands in the deal after meeting with Trump last week. Israel said they submitted their response to this new proposal to Egyptian mediators, and now they're waiting for Hamas's response. Emily?
All right, thank you, Shosh, for that update. Well, the ceasefire is continuing to hold in Lebanon, and there are signs that Hezbollah is in full retreat, according to Western and Lebanese media. The Lebanese army has now taken control of most Hezbollah bases in South Lebanon and even some in the areas north of the Litani River. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The Lebanese army has reportedly taken control of most Hezbollah bases in South Lebanon without resistance. AFP reports Hezbollah admitting that it handed over most of its military sites in accordance with the ceasefire agreement with Israel, surrendering 190 out of 205 military positions it held south of the Litani River at the start of the war. The ceasefire went into effect on November 27th, ending more than a year of war. The agreement stipulates that only United Nations peacekeepers and the Lebanese army will be present in South Lebanon and requires that Hezbollah dismantle its remaining infrastructure and move its fighters north of the Litani, about 30 kilometers north of the Israeli border. Hezbollah began attacking Israel with near daily rocket and drone attacks on October 8th of last year, a day after Hamas attack from Gaza. The attacks by Hezbollah forced the evacuation of 60,000 Israeli northern residents, killed dozens of soldiers and civilians, and caused significant damages. Israel hit back with airstrikes that escalated into an IDF incursion in South Lebanon that decimated Hezbollah leadership and weapons stockpiles. Following the ceasefire agreement, the IDF withdrew from South Lebanon but remains in 5 points deemed strategic by Israel and continues to strike targets in Lebanon that pose an imminent threat.
The White House says the U.S. is moving towards a nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia. The announcement did not mention tying the deal to normalization with Israel. More from ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian.
In Riyadh, U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright met Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman and announced that Riyadh and Washington were on a pathway to reaching an agreement to work together to develop a Saudi civilian nuclear industry. Wright did not mention a potential wider agreement with the kingdom, which the previous administration of U.S. President Joe Biden had been seeking, which would include the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Wright said the Saudis would have to abide by the so-called 123 agreement, which relates to the U.S. Atomic Energy Act of 1954, barring U.S. government and private companies to develop the Saudi nuclear industry unless it adheres to conditions.
So Saudi Arabia has resources here, mineral resources, including uranium, and it has a desire to expand even further its energy production via commercial nuclear power. The technology for commercial nuclear power was developed in the United States. We're continuing dialogues about how best to cooperate, United States and Saudi Arabia, to ultimately build a commercial nuclear power industry in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I think you'll see meaningful developments on that this year, and I would certainly expect to see a long-term cooperative partnership between the United States and the Kingdom to develop commercial nuclear power right here in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi officials have not agreed to requirements under the act that would prevent the technology from being used to develop weapons and the transfer of sensitive materials to others. The Saudis have insisted on having the possibility of enriching uranium or reprocessing spent fuel, both potential paths to a bomb. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has insisted that if Iran developed a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia would follow suit.
Israel has confirmed that it held a high-level round of talks with Turkey in an effort to avoid potential conflicts in Syria. Officials in Jerusalem say that another round of talks will be held after the Passover holiday. The talks between Turkey and Israel reportedly got off to a rocky start when Ankara refused to allow an Israeli Air Force plane carrying the Israeli delegation to pass through its airspace. The plane was forced to take a detour over the Black Sea to reach the talks in Azerbaijan. According to the public broadcaster, no agreements were reached in talks designed to lower tensions in Syria, where Turkey has taken on the role of defender of the post-Assad regime. After the fall of Assad, the IDF sent forces into the Syrian Golan, where they still remain, to prevent potential hostile attacks. The talks were encouraged by Washington and are a part of an effort to prevent incidents that could bring clashes between the IDF and the Turkish army inside Syria. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan confirmed that Ankara has been engaging in operational-level coordination with Israel to avoid incidents. The message from Turkish President Erdogan was not conciliatory, accusing Israel of trying to destroy what he called the Syrian revolution.
Suriye'de etnik ve dini aidiyetleri kaşıyarak ülkedeki azınlıkları hükümete karşı kışkırtarak 8 Aralık devrimini dinamitlemeye çalışıyor. Bakın, Türkiye'nin bu konudaki tutumu gayet nettir. Biz komşumuz Suriye'de 14 yıl süren çatışma ve istikrarsızlığın yükünü en fazla çeken, bunun bedelini ödeyen ülkelerden biriyiz.
In a sweeping move to curb terror support on American campuses that has plagued universities since October 7th, the Trump administration has revoked over 800 student visas from at least 150 universities and initiated deportations of multiple individuals, including Columbia student Mahmoud Khalil, one of the leaders of the illegal pro-Hamas encampment on Columbia University's campus. Khalil was arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents in March and was transferred to a detention facility in Louisiana. An immigration judge ruled this week that Khalil is deportable under a statute allowing removal of non-citizens whose presence is deemed detrimental to U.S. foreign policy. The Trump administration has defended these actions as necessary measures to ensure that the U.S. campuses do not become breeding grounds for terror support. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that students engaging in activities that undermine U.S. foreign policy interests, particularly those supporting anti-Israel agendas, will face immigration consequences. Khalil's attorneys and supporters slammed the decision, claiming it infringes on his rights to free speech. However, Khalil's conduct and activities on campus are the primary motivations for the deportation, not his opinion or commentary. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of around 12 degrees Celsius or 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see more cloudy skies and partly rainy showers alongside steady temperatures with highs of about 20 degrees Celsius or 69 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, happy Passover, and thank you for watching.